All right, we can get going.
We ready?
Yep.
Recording in progress.
Well, turn that up.
This monitor's not on.
We're good. God, don't unplug me. David, you know you have a letter? Getting your mail here now?
Only the important stuff.
Are we good?
Yes, we are good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to the November 2nd Select Board meeting. Before we get started, if you would all join us in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Having a technical difficulty. Neil?
Hey, Ethan, we're still having trouble with this.
Still not displaying?
No.
No.
All right, here we go. Okay, so we have figured out our technical difficulties. So first, to start the meeting, we have public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to express their opinions on items both on and not on the official agenda. Public comment is not intended to be a discussion, debate, or dialogue between or among the select board and residents. And we have some additional guidelines. Before sharing substantive comments, we ask residents to state their names, addresses, and if known, voting precinct. Each speaker will be limited to speaking once for a maximum of 3 minutes. Residents may raise new issues, identify community problems, and comment on past, present, or future board agendas. Absent extraordinary circumstances, the board will not respond or react to the issues raised, and they should not be discussed or debated at the time. We request residents speak respectfully and refrain from criticizing or disparaging individual committee members, town staff, or other residents, groups, or individuals. And we request that residents refrain from making comments that contain political statements or include commentary, criticisms, or other statements about any town staff. Individuals may speak at the discretion of the chair. And I believe we have Mary DiCillo is here and has public comment. And if I'll just mention, if you want to submit public comment through email, you can do so at nduffy@swampscottma.gov, or you can raise your hand on Zoom as well. Mr. DiCillo.
Thank you, Select Board. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that you take my comment tonight. I'm Mary DiCillo. I live at 7 Rockland Street, and I am a Precinct 4 town meeting member as well. I'm coming tonight just because I found some pictures from last year's Veterans Day celebration that I would like to submit for the archive. And just to remind people that the Veterans celebration is held every Veterans Day at the Memorial Day at the monument area, and it's really always very powerful because we have veterans that come from all the different wars and people who served in peacetime, and family members, and the Boy Scouts are there, and the Girl Scouts, and I just am encouraging fellow citizens like myself. I get very inspired by it, so I'm hoping that all of you will join in. I come tonight just to talk about, very briefly, what I have taught at Salem State and worked with veterans at Salem State on is increasing what's called, in the parlance, military cultural competence. And I'm urging that all public officials here, particularly the select board and town administrator, when considering any kind of policy decisions and financial decisions and service decisions, that a framework of military cultural competence be used. And that means that military is actually, people who serve in the military become part of a different culture than civilian culture, and it has its own unique language, its own unique values, its own unique ways of looking at things, and sometimes that can get lost in a civilian population that hasn't served. So I am urging everyone, including me, myself, and others, that residents, to do that. So as in that vein, I just have some suggestions, and I've given the Board of Selectmen, select board members, I'm in the old parlance, see, my language hasn't changed either, some suggestions about ways that the town could maybe move forward in this direction using this framework. So the two things that are still pending that I again would remind the board that it's really important to be paying attention to is the role of the veteran service officer in a town of like Swampscott, and the services that they provide. It's really important that that people have access to that in a very way. And the other issue that's still pending, as far as I know, is the to Veterans Crossing, to the VFW Hall, the lease, and I don't know the status of that. It's not I'm not here to talk about that tonight, but I just want to remind those that are involved in that decision that it's really important for veterans to have a place that they can come to and be part of. So the thing I'm most encouraging people to think about is conducting a needs assessment of veterans, so that the town engage in a very formal outreach to veterans in a written way, so that veterans can, we create a tool, and there are tools out there that we can assess what the specific needs of the veterans in Swampscott are, which are going to be somewhat the same as other vet towns. It may be different than other towns, but we should really be hearing from veterans and their families, because it also includes service members' families, and veteran people who have survivors of veterans as well. Access to services, military families and military members, veterans, the level of need, statistics from other towns, the service provided by the Veteran Services Office, and also assess what kind of services we're getting currently, and making sure that we're getting the appropriate level of service in our town. Because veterans, when I work with veterans at Salem State specifically, they're not going to make any noise because they're used to taking orders. I've said this out loud publicly. And they are used to sort of getting by and kind of toughing it out sometimes. And we all know with the suicide rate sometimes, currently, it's not all bad. But in terms of what veterans are facing, not everybody has been in combat, not everybody is suffering from invisible wounds of combat, but there are needs out there. And as the veterans' aging population goes forward, particularly Vietnam veterans who really never accessed services until many of them now in their early 70s, are really important. And so some positive things, again, listing a Veterans Service Committee on the website. I didn't see anything on the website having a Veterans Committee, Advisory Committee. I don't know if that's happening, but I think having a place for veterans to sort of gather together. They're used to working in groups, and getting them working as a group in terms of creating public policy, collaborating with public policy makers, so that the right services are put in, particularly around technology. So there's some money that has been granted for technology. I would urge very strongly that working with Capital Improvements Committee to be able to make sure that that money is veteran-driven, so that it's an appropriate use of the money for the needs that they have. And another thing that we did up at Salem State is an oral history project, which I think would be a wonderful way of getting veterans engaged, the senior center engaged, the high school engaged, where up at Salem State, there's an archive of people can come in and tell their story about being in the military, not just combat veterans, but veterans of all different wars. Also, getting the library involved, having a section about war, peace, veterans, having a book club, having a veteran civilian book club. One of the most amazing things that happened when I taught up at Salem State is that have people in a classroom together that are veterans and non-veterans. You learn a lot. Civilians and people from the military can really teach a lot to each other. And the last thing is all the committees that are in town should always be mindful of the role that veterans can and should play in terms of creating services within the town. So making sure that it's an integrative model and that it's a military culturally competent model where people know about the military. I will be forwarding to you a bibliography that I've put together. I have a bunch of a whole book list and websites and things like that I'm going to give to the library as well, so that people can access. It's work that I've done at Salem State that I'm happy to share. And also having just a presence, having a visual, this is a population in our town that are strengths and have lots to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chillo. Any more public comment? Okay, thanks. And I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, so that brings us to our main agenda items. We do have on the agenda a discussion and possible vote on accepting some sculptures as a gift, but the person making that donation is not here tonight, so I think we're going to table that discussion until hopefully he can be present. The next item I think we will try to do, we have a public hearing at 6:30, but we have the deed signing for the Haas property. The Haas property is on Archer Street. It's an approximately 5-acre parcel, excuse me, on Archer Street. That was town meeting authorized the town to acquire at a special town meeting over the summer, and we are finally at a point of closing that transaction with the owners, the Haas family, and so tonight we need to accept that deed in order to close, I think, by the end of the week. I'll mention that town staff, Pete Kane and Marzi Glasgow, I think, are working on the conservation restriction for that parcel. So hopefully we'll be putting a conservation restriction on that land over the next few weeks or a month. So with that, we can move to discussion about the deed. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this?
I just think this is an incredible acquisition of open space, one of the largest acquisitions of open space that the town's seen in decades. So incredibly excited for the entire town, incredibly excited for those neighbors in Precinct 1, and really look forward to working with the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and other volunteers in town to blaze some paths, some trails, and get lost in the woods for a little bit.
Comments, questions? Okay, so I can't make a motion, but I'll read the motion language that was provided by town staff. There'd be a motion that the select board approve the deed from Joyce M. Haas for property located on Archer Street and further execute the acceptance of the select board to said deed.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So with that, I think being six, yeah, why don't we sign this deed and then we can open this public hearing.
No, they have to do, I've never had them sign that before. I've always done it electronic.
Sir.
Okay.
That's all right, don't have to sign all the right. I can't hear, just.
Okay. So I think, why don't we, I'm always trying to make the best use of time. Like, what can we do for the next 2 minutes?
Some committees?
Yeah, do you want to, maybe we can move on to some of these committee appointments?
Perfect.
We have 4 committee appointments tonight. We have, why don't we just start down the list and see where we can get for the Andrews Chapel Committee? Sean, I don't know if you want to speak to this?
Yep, we have some extraordinary individuals that have agreed to help with helping the work of Andrews Chapel. Elizabeth Gallo is the daughter of Betty Gallo, who was one of our most significant contributors to the effort to renovate the chapel. That chapel is on the National Historic Register. Last week I held a staff meeting there and would suggest this board hold a meeting there at some point and really appreciate the architectural significance of that building, but also the individuals that really helped to restore it. It was at a point of potentially losing that, so there's no question that Elizabeth will keep that legacy of constant gardening and care for that building, and would recommend that she be appointed to that committee. Also, Jonathan Davis for the Renewable Energies Committee. Jonathan has a passion for renewable energy. The chair of the Renewable Energies Committee strongly recommend Jonathan for this committee. Like many of the board members, Jonathan can probably serve on a dozen different committees, but certainly I think his passion is to really help the town think about ways where we can be more reliant on resilient energy solutions. We have Susan Bishop and Jody Watts, both for our War Memorial Scholarship Fund. Susan has done so many wonderful things for our veterans. Susan is working with our Veterans Crossing. She attends monthly meetings of our veteran service organizations and has worked with our veterans groups to really reboot the connection that all of these different veteran service organizations bring to different groups of veterans in Swampscott. Really impressed with Jody Watts as well. Jody cares about our veterans, certainly wants to be involved in supporting some of these initiatives, and I think they will do a fantastic job integrating some of these scholarship funds with our school district. And lastly, the ZBA, Mark Koninsky and Heather Roman. Mark and Heather both have served our ZBA for many years. Heather recently served as chair of task force to explore leaving civil service. She has been working on our solid waste committee, and I think her judgment, her discretion, leadership would serve our ZBA extraordinarily well. Mark is one of the more foremost real estate attorneys in the region, and certainly his experience is second to none.
So the ZBA, just for clarification, is one that we did with Heather Roman at a previous meeting, but Heather was an associate member, and we made her a full member, and Mark was a full member, and we needed to make Mark an associate member. So he's stepping down as chair and will be an associate member, and Heather's stepping in for full membership.
Okay, so but on
There
here,
aren't enough members.
on here, he's just listed as a regular member, not as.
Right, so this is a misprint on the memo, but that's my understanding, right, Diane?
That's
That
correct, yep.
Mark will be appointed as an associate member, and Heather will be a full member, which we did vote on last time, but we needed to do that switch, which we didn't do.
I just have a quick question. On the War Memorial Scholarship Fund, is that a scholarship that's given out every year?
It should be given out every year. It has not always been given out every year.
Why?
Okay, it has, okay.
It has been given out every year?
Yes.
Through the high school?
Yes.
Thank you.
So motion to approve Elizabeth Gallo to the Andrews Chapel Oversight Committee, Jonathan Davids to the Renewable Energy Committee, Jody Watts and Susan Bishop to the War Memorial Scholarship Fund Committee, and Heather Roman as a full member, and Mark Korninski as an associate member to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
Great, any more further discussion?
Oh, wait, there was one, I'm so sorry, but there were no
It's okay.
terms listed for, oh, there are terms. Oh, there are terms now, okay. Take that question away.
Okay,
Strike it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, good. All right,
Thank you.
thanks. And with that, we will move on to our public hearing. This is a public hearing for a liquor license application for Cafe Avellino located at 242 Humphrey Street. And it's an application to extend liquor service to the street. So if there is any, do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I think, Angelica, you're gonna lead us through this, or?
Oh, I can't get the PowerPoint on my computer, so if it's possible to pull it up here.
I don't know that I have a PowerPoint for cafe, is it?
For the BYOB.
Oh.
Right?
No, No, we're we're on
Oh, we're
cafe.
still,
We're on Avellino.
oh, okay, sorry, I thought,
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, sorry.
I think you covered most of it, if there's any questions. Sorry. I was saying, I think that you covered most of it, but if there's any questions, I can answer. But the summary is that during the pandemic, the governor had an executive order that allowed businesses, restaurants to serve alcohol outside, either on the street or on the sidewalk. Teresa from Cafe Avellino found that this was a great success for her, and she just wants to extend this permanent. So the temporary order will expire in April, and and the ABC is requesting that we submit formal applications to make this permanent and tied to their liquor license now. That way, once the order expires in April, there will be no overlap. And I think it's in the packet, but at the town meeting in May, it was approved at town meeting to allow outdoor seating with the liquor license included. So there's no zoning issue. And she does have permission from her landlord to have the 12 tables out front. Is there any questions?
Any questions? It's a public hearing, so is there any public comment on this issue? Angelica, do you think, I don't know what the status is of the other establishments that have outdoor seating that serve liquor on that street? Like, do we expect that we're gonna have a influx of these if that's expiring? Like, is this a requirement to have that?
So if they want to continue outdoor service, they do have to apply for this, but there's only 2 other businesses who would qualify to, or who have been serving outside, who should apply for it, but none of them are on Humphrey Street. The other 2 are, I believe, in the Vinnon Square area. So I don't think that we will see an influx. I can say that if I can list, it's like Pomona, Tyrific, Cafe Avellino, if she's approved, Nordhaven and Zest Friends, they're a lot of the businesses who already have this tied to their license.
Got it.
This is already tied to their license already?
For the businesses who I just said, Teresa is wanting to add it to her license. The reason it worked out kind of perfectly that there was 2 transfers during COVID, so the ABC said, being proactive, if they want to extend this, let's just add it to their license now during their initial application. That way we don't have to go back and amend it whenever this executive order might expire. Teresa kind of waited it out to see how long, because the order kept getting extended and extended, but now that they're finally saying it's most likely gonna end on April 1st, this is why she's submitting this application now. But I think she's probably the last one, unless, of course, we have a new business come in.
Right.
What about Little G?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Little G, G Bar, yes, they have it too. Exactly, sorry, I missed that
So
one.
they're all covered.
They're all covered, yep. G Bar submitted an alteration of premise, and the other ones were during their initial application, whether it be the new application or transfer.
Okay, great.
For the 2 that have not, have we been proactive to reach out to them to let them know it's available?
We have, yep. Marzi and I both reached out to them, and I sent out the annual renewal packets for the fiscal 2023 license, and I put that executive order in there and highlighted it, and also put it in an email so that they have all that information.
Great.
Great.
Okay. So there's no public comment, so with that, I think if there's a motion to close the public hearing, and then we can vote on this.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any further discussion outside of public hearing? Okay, is there a motion to approve the Cafe Avellino liquor license for outdoor service?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thanks. So, moving on, I think there is, if people are following our printed agenda, there is an item for the new elementary school contractor bids. We are planning on having a discussion about the contractor bids that were opened this week by the school building committee. They have postponed their discussion. They were to meet on it last night, but they're meeting on it tomorrow night. So we are going to table our discussion until the school building committee has theirs, and then we will likely take this up on November 16th.
Okay.
So, and we just did our committee appointments, so I think we're sticking with Angelica and the BYOB brown bag license policy. So this came to us, a little background is there's interest from some establishments to be able to provide BYOB to their customers, and Angelica, correct me when I make a mistake, and you have a presentation, so I'll stop talking soon, but it turns out that we don't have a policy for BYOB, in that the way the law works is that it's essentially allowed, but, you know, sort of by right, if you will. So if you have a common Vic's license, I guess. So Angelica and Marzi and other staff have been doing research on other community policies and putting together a basic policy that we can have so that we can accommodate this want from some of the businesses in town to be able to offer this service. So that's what we're reviewing and potentially voting on tonight.
I think you covered it all.
That's all right.
Angelica, what kind of drink is that?
So the BYOB.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, that?
Yes.
It looks
No,
cool.
on the slide.
Oh.
Is that like,
It's,
is that
I don't know.
pineapple?
I think so.
Smoothie,
Yeah.
non-alcoholic.
It's only beer and wine
Well,
in
only
there.
beer and wine, so it must
Understood.
be beer and wine based.
So it's exactly what Neil said. We had a business who came forward to ask if we could offer BYOB, and we found out that we did not have a policy. And in Massachusetts, it is completely legal, and it's unregulated unless the select board or the town, city decides to regulate it. So I'll just go over a quick overview of the license that we have now, just as a reminder. This is not off-premise, this is just on-premise, because obviously that would be what BYOB is. So for all alcohol, we have 17 allowed, and we've issued 13. For wines and malts, we're allowed 5, and we've issued 1. And then special legislation, so I find it easiest to keep special legislation separate from the total count. Special legislation is, so at some point in time, we went to the legislature and asked them for additional license in the Humphrey Street, like, overlay district, I believe. And we were approved for 8, and out of those, we've used 2. So if you're looking technically we have 15 all alcoholic beverage license and 1 wines, malts, and cordials. And I hope that clears it up, because I know there's
It
been
does. We actually got those licenses in 2018, and I
Okay.
know that we have a reporter here from the Lynn item, and it would be awesome if they reminded everybody that we have 6 licenses available.
Yes.
We really want businesses to come and ask to have one of those licenses.
I think we should. I believe it's B1, B2, B3, right? Is that there's 3 different areas. But every time there is a new license that comes in, I always do work with Marzi and Marissa to see if they're within that area and to see if we can fulfill those licenses, because the special legislation gives us the opportunity to offer more license, obviously, than what's allowed by our quota. Is there any questions about the license? Can you do that?
Do they all expire at the same time?
They do, so they're for 1 calendar year, they all expire on the 31st. So this is, I don't want to read the whole PowerPoint, but this is just the overview that the Swampscott Select Board, as a local licensing authority, would be adopting this policy. And for purpose of this policy, an establishment shall mean a full-service commercial food service enterprise that holds a common victualer's license. So if they don't have that common vic license, they wouldn't be eligible for the BYOB. And then full service would be a full wait staff with sit-down dining services. This is some of the general requirements for the license. So I can't even see that far. So the BYOB requesting approval to serve alcohol under this policy agrees to abide by the legal standards and ensure safe and proper service to patrons in accordance with Mass General Law, as well as the laws put forth by the ABCC and the rules and regulations of Swampscott. Oh, thank you. Any BYOB shall, BYOB approval is at the sole discretion of the select board. So it is completely up to the select board as the LLA to approve this policy. So there's, we put together, what we did was we reached out to 11 different surrounding communities, both cities and towns, and we put together a policy that kind of encompassed a lot of what other cities and towns offered, but kind of what we thought was best for the town of Swampscott. So instead of reading all of these, I put together a couple of notes just as highlights what we think might be the most important. So all servers who will be serving alcohol, serving food, must be tip certified or trained, and they have to be trained. The managers also have to be trained. This would be limited to beer and wine only. There will be no like alcohol, vodka or anything like that coming in. It would just be beer and wine. The wine must be unopened when they come to the premises, and it has to be consumed with food. Do you mind switching to the next slide? We did put in there that alcoholic beverages may only be consumed between the hours of 11 a.m. and 11 p.m., but we'd actually like to change that to say that the hours of consumption have to follow that of their common victualer's license. That way, you don't have somebody ordering food until 9 and then they're still sitting there at midnight drinking alcohol, or 11 p.m., whatever the select board decides to agree upon. But I think following the common vic is probably the most beneficial and the safest for everybody. We also decided to put in that there would not be a corking fee. So that would be like each business offering this would charge $5 per person. We spoke with KP Law, and they just suggested that once you start charging, it kind of gets a little gray because you're charging for a service involving alcohol, so it wasn't like the best to take money for that. And then another is that the premise cannot sell alcohol. You can't walk in and say, oh, here, buy this bottle of wine, but you can serve it yourself. It has to be from like a liquor store. And then again, the business has to agree to follow all the rules and regulations of the ABC. They have to follow any town rules and regulations, and they must allow compliance checks. So each November and throughout the year, the police department works and we do inspections, make sure people have proper signage. So the establishments applying for these BYOB permits must allow them to come in and do compliance checks. Are there any questions?
I did have a couple questions, Angelica.
Sure. I'll try and answer to the best of my ability. If not, I'll research it and come back.
That's all we can do. I did have there was some language that talked about, I guess, no more than 750 milliliters of wine for every 1 or 2 patrons. I just thought that was just kind of, it's just, is it 1 or is it 2? That just kind of was a question that I had. There was a limit of no more than 5 permits annually. Is that just something, is that a number that we just came up with?
Yeah, these were just other guidelines and other rules and regulations from, I looked at like Marblehead, who was close to us, Winthrop, Boston, and we kind of just decided what might be most beneficial for Swampscott, but that's definitely language that can be changed.
Okay.
And I would think like you can change it to have unlimited BYOB, but I didn't know if the select board wanted to put a restriction like some other towns just so that not everybody goes to BYOB, or you can have like some sort of regulation for that, but it's completely up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer if they purchased a full liquor license, if there was one available.
We have 6 available.
There are 6 available.
right.
Want to make sure the
And
reporter
The regular ones available too.
So as part of the proposed policy, there was also enforcement. We talk about civil penalties of $100 for the first offense, $200 for the second offense, $300 for the third and subsequent offenses. Is that commensurate with the
Typical.
the fines or the enforcement of a regular full license?
I am not sure, but I can get back to you on that. That particular section and that section, the quarry section, as well as the proof of liquor liability, those are 3 areas that we did reach out to our insurance company, and we're still kind of waiting for an answer.
Okay.
But I can double check with, I can't get my files when I'm not on my work Wi-Fi, so I can't pull up the penalties for a regular liquor license. But I can certainly make sure that they do kind of coincide with those.
Yeah. I just wouldn't want to have something that's more onerous here than.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And I guess the other question that I had was, is there a charge to the business owner for this, or proposed charge?
Yeah, so we wanted to leave that up to the select board to decide. I know that before we had possibly had $1,000 in Swampscott, but it's really up to the select board. I did, out of the 11 towns who I reached out to, I was able to find 4 policies. In those policies, the annual fee ranged from $400 to $450. So I don't know if we want to be more in line with them, or if you want me to reach out to additional towns to see. There was one, it was like $400 for the, or $450 for the initial, and $400 each year after, should they decide to keep it. But there wasn't really anything that was too far above that price point.
How much is a liquor license?
The all alcohol liquor license would be $2,400, and then the beer and wine license is $2,100. So it would be like significantly cheaper, but it's also not, like, it's kind of more like a benefit.
Right.
They're not always gonna have people who bring alcohol. It's a benefit that the small business might be able to
Right.
bring in more people. But we could keep it at the 1,000. I know that I just wanted to leave it blank so that I could decide.
How many businesses have asked for this?
Only one.
One.
We did have two businesses before. Cafe Avellino had a BYOB permit before they had their all alcohol license, and then Cafe Paulina was where the business so Andrea's is who is side note, that's who is asking for one. And I heard from several residents that they used to go to Cafe Paulina, and when they came into Andrea's, they said, oh, they used to have a BYOB, can we still do that? And that's kind of what sparked the owner to look into it, to ask us. Is there any other, for the number 12, patrons are allowed to carry in only. So that was also like guidance from another policy, but we can certainly change that. I just think that it was kind of suggested to have a limit on it. That way one person isn't bringing in like 30 beers and they're finishing it. It kind of just gives some, it gives like some restrictions as to what they can and can't bring. That way you kind of limit the people who might be leaving intoxicated.
Yeah, I think the question on that was just the 1 or 2, right?
Oh, okay.
I think,
What?
so maybe just,
I think the distinction there is that if you are by yourself and brought a bottle of wine, you could still open it, but then if there are 2 of you, you shouldn't bring 2 bottles. Is that right?
That's how I
got
read it
it,
as well.
got it. Yeah, no, that makes
It's
sense.
not 1 bottle per person.
Correct,
but-
right, I got you. So if 2 of you go in, you can't bring 2.
Right, but
That
if
makes
one of you
sense.
came in, you wouldn't be in violation if you
Oh,
brought a
thanks.
regular sized bottle.
Yep, makes sense.
But if you had 3, you could bring 2.
You could bring 2 bottles, correct?
Okay.
And then one other thing that I just wanted to point out is we did put in here, just for you to decide, a quarry check. KP Law said that it's because the business is not serving the alcohol, they're not providing the alcohol, it's not necessary, it's not required that the manager has a quarry check. But I wasn't sure if that was something that the select board wanted to keep in, just because we do fingerprinting for like the regular license. I didn't know, but KP Law did suggest that, not that we take it out, but they said it's not necessary. So if we were to take it out, that would be totally fine.
Do they have a recommendation?
He basically just said that we can leave it in if we want, but it's not necessary.
I think the idea here is if we have liquor licenses available and they're not being utilized, and then we make another avenue for BYOB, we should make it as similar to a liquor license so that the liquor licenses get utilized. So I think if the parallel is that we require it under the liquor license and therefore we should require it here, I understand that sort of idea, so that folks are looking at this as synonymous to a liquor license type ability for their business without the cost of having liquor in their business.
So you're saying to have it as a quarry, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
to keep it that way. To almost have it be the same requirements that you would have under a traditional liquor license, under the BYOB, so that the incentive is only not to purchase all the liquor, to have in there facility, but have somebody bring it in. That way they're still going through all the same steps, maybe then to say, it might be worth it for them to take the next step in their business and have the full liquor license.
Some people can't get a liquor license, you know, for, you know, different citizenship reasons, and there's reasons why companies can't pursue it. I'd like to see it as easy as possible, but I am good with, you know, having pretty much the same rules. I just want to keep in mind that the reason they're not taking on a liquor license, there are extenuating circumstances for companies, especially like Paulina's.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I agree, like with Mary Ellen, I think we do want to have that balance, right? Like, you don't want it to be so easy that everybody wants to do it, but you also want to acknowledge that there's reasons to pursue this, other than affordability, but affordability being one of them.
But it seems that it's already easy, right?
Right.
It already exists.
Right.
You could theoretically walk in.
No, yeah, we need to have some guidelines,
Right.
yeah. And so, one question I had, Angelica, was I think you had mentioned TIPS certification, but I don't think I see that on the draft. Is that in the policy that we have?
Number 3, the
Okay.
establishment is responsible for training all managers and staff that serves patrons in the correct procedures pertaining to this policy. So I think that we didn't specifically say tips because there are different types of training. It's not, you can do like, I don't know the companies off the top of my head, but they're not all like called tip certification. There could be like the American certification. A lot of the one-day liquor license, they take part in different types of training, but if you want us to specify what type of training, we could.
Well, I guess I just wonder like how how one would document the training otherwise, like.
Yeah, so they would have to go through a training, either tip certification or something similar, and we would require them to provide us with that documentation. So that would be similar to a one-day license, where if you request a special permit for a one-day liquor license, each person who is serving, they have to provide their tip certification. So this would be very similar to that.
But in a situation like this, nobody is serving. So would the tips, would that certification just teach people how to deal with somebody who's
I think so.
getting out of control, or how to identify if
Exactly, and they also have to check their IDs, and if someone who is
they snuck
18,
in another bottle of wine?
yeah, exactly. Maybe someone who's 18, they're not 21 yet, they're not familiar with like what a real ID looks like, they're not familiar with an out-of-state ID, the tip certification or like training would train them in doing so.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Are there other courses or, you know, other ways to document that training other than tips? Did you just say there are like other ways to?
There's online courses that people can take. I know that, I can't think of the company off the top of my head, but I know there's other certification training courses online. We might be able to research like the most effective training courses and put that in here, saying that it has to be one of these like accredited training courses, if that's what you're.
Yeah, I think maybe if there were, you could say like, I'm not a lawyer, but like something like including
Yeah.
but not limited to tips, something, you know, other ones.
Yeah,
And like,
could do that.
and other documentation for training, like you
Yeah.
could leave it open so that there are other ways to document their training. I think that the generic language makes me worry about, like, how do we confirm that these people have been
That they're doing
trained?
it.
If
Okay.
it's just the manager saying, yeah, I told them about the policy, like, it needs, I think should be more than that, probably, so
Okay.
that's all. I think I would like to see something more specific there.
No, that makes sense.
Even if it's just tips or like an industry equivalent standard. you
Right.
know, something
I don't
like
want to
that.
limit it to
Right.
one, I want it to be open to other ways to do it, but
Okay.
just so there's a way in that we're asking for something.
That way it's not just the manager having like a 20-minute training saying this is what you're
Yeah,
doing.
here,
It's
read
a
this.
Yeah,
Right.
you
that makes
know?
sense. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, so I think that would be great. And then as far as the fee goes, I guess along the lines of of not making it so easy or cheap to do that it is competing with liquor licenses, then maybe the $400 makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say 400. Just to
Yeah.
make it a little easier access, you know, not to put a burden
Right.
on the business.
And we could reevaluate in a year.
Yeah.
We're not setting this policy
Right.
forever.
Yeah, I would think you might have some civic and social organizations looking to utilize this, you know, or have it, you know, be part of a, you know, a non-commercial use.
You mean like select board meetings at the restaurant?
We have a BYOB.
BYOB select board meeting?
That is a very interesting point. I wonder if the reporter heard that.
Do you want me to ask them?
Maybe you could look into
I think drinking at the high school is highly
You know,
inappropriate.
I do think, you know, as the market changes, look, we want to make sure that Humphrey Street and Benton Square and our MBTA neighborhood, if there are small businesses that can get started and use this BYOB as a way to really venture into a business that is challenging. You know, this makes a lot of sense, having this as part of our regulatory offerings. What's interesting is that, you know, we do have a number of other licenses, and, you know, having 6 all alcohol licenses is really attractive. There have been times where these have been unavailable, and so, you know, I just would urge folks to get the word out. We have a lot of properties in Swampscott, in these areas, that really could be very attractive for a commercial venture. And, you know, I never want to lose an opportunity to talk about that.
The other thing that, I don't know if we would be open to doing this, but since it's a new policy, if we wanted to word it in a way that the annual fee for the BYOB permit shall be like
Prorated.
yearly, maybe that it's determined yearly by the select board at like an annual meeting. That way, if you decide to do it at a higher cost now, and then you feel like, oh, maybe it should be lower, or vice versa, you would have the ability to change it.
That would be good.
Would that be like a better way to list this, just to say that it's to the discretion of the select board at X meeting, but it would have to be determined like at this time each year, because these would go from the calendar date. So if someone were to apply like in November, they would obviously only have it till December 31st, and they would have to reapply again. It would be similar to the other liquor license.
Right, because we don't have the ability to prorate it, right? Right, so it wouldn't get prorated, so it would be foolish to take out a permit like in November, just be better just to wait till January. Okay.
So you're saying the language would say something like the annual fee for a BYOB permit shall be determined by the select board?
On such date.
Yeah.
Maybe if there's whatever date, if you vote on other fees, maybe we could add it in at that same time.
Yeah, I'm worried
I
about
think-
that getting
Yeah.
lost.
I think
I
the
won't
board,
get
Trust
lost.
ourselves.
the board has the ability to, you know,
We could change it
determine
at
the
any time
fees,
regardless.
you know.
We can do it anyways, right?
And so
Maybe we,
I think it's just understood that, you know, as the licensing authority, they have the discretionary judgment to establish the fees. And I think we can just leave that out there.
Okay.
Generally, the board from time to time does look at these fees and try to ensure that we are staying consistent with the market. The market is just the communities you listed when you began your presentation. It's Marblehead, it's Winthrop, it's peer communities that we compete with when folks are looking to open up a small business.
yeah, so I think maybe we would stick with the 400
Okay.
specific. So I think that it sounds like with the comments and additions and revisions that we just discussed, that maybe we can vote on this at our next meeting
Okay.
to adopt the policy, just to make sure we do all those language changes. Does that make sense to everybody? I know that, you know, there's anxious business people that want to start
It's
doing
okay.
this, but I think that maybe it probably makes most sense to just have the language as close as we can
Yeah.
to adopt it with that, and then if there are any small changes, we can probably adopt it with those small changes next time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. If there's any other changes, if you think of after the meeting, if you want to email me them, I can make sure that they're put into this policy and maybe send a rough draft first. That way, when we come back to the next meeting, it's confirmed.
Perfect.
That's great, yeah, I would say, you know, when the small changes that we made are once those are incorporated, you can send them off to Diane, and she can provide them to us, and we can review, and should have plenty of time to
Okay.
take a look and make sure we don't see anything else.
David, going back to your enforcement question, I just want to make sure, you're saying you want it neither more burdensome nor less burdensome than a liquor license penalty, right?
Just
to
an
mirror
even playing field.
the enforcement.
The enforcement, the
section,
same as.
Just to
On the-
mirror whatever a typical,
On the fees,
on the fees, yes.
the penalties.
Penalties, yeah.
Yeah,
And I'll have the information about the liability for the next meeting. I don't think that we would be, like, the town of Swampscott would be listed, like, on the one-day liquor license, but it would just be enforcing that the person has liability insurance should there be an incident. We're making sure that the community is safe and that they do have the liability insurance.
Oh, I did have a question on liability insurance. It seemed like the limits were very low. Is that typical?
That was typical for the other policies that we looked at, but that was one of our questions is, do we need to add this? Should we add it? And what numbers should we be putting in and what numbers should we be? I know nothing about insurance, but I assume like the higher the coverage, the higher the cost. So if a small business is not investing in a liquor license because maybe it's too expensive, then forcing them to have a liability insurance policy that's so expensive, like maybe we just want to be with the industry, whatever the standard is.
Okay.
But I should have the answers hopefully soon. Amy reached out to them on Monday.
If you're worried about the select board, we have $1 million liability policy, so.
That seems a little low, too.
all right, great.
Also, I just like calling it brown bag. Why, let's not call it that. Let's just call it BYOB. Let's take brown bag off the table. I feel
Brown
like
bag?
antiquated.
We can. A lot of people call it a carry-in
triggered.
policy.
Carry
Carry-in.
Carry-in policy.
Carry-in, yeah.
But brown bag is what the ABC refers to it as.
That phrase.
It is odd.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds like elementary school lunch.
It does.
Yeah, yeah.
It does.
It's meant to be childlike and wonderful and not related to alcoholics.
okay. Thanks, Angelica, this is great. I think it'd be good to have this
Thanks,
policy in
Angelica.
place. All right, so, moving on. We have the special town meeting warrant. So, a couple actions for us tonight are to open the special town meeting warrant, and I believe we have to set the date.
I
Right?
do, yes.
And then we can discuss, to the extent that we can discuss the articles in their current form, as they are. But if we have a motion to open the special town meeting warrant and to set the date for a special town meeting for December 5th at 7 PM.
7 PM, yep.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great. And then, yeah, so I guess before, maybe we'll go article by article. I will say, not sure if anyone has watched any finance committee meetings lately, but they've discussed some of this in their recent meetings. One important item to keep in mind is that the free cash certification from the state, we still don't have our free cash certification. and the state has informed Amy that they will have it to us by our December 5th town meeting, but whether we will have it by the time we need to actually vote on these, make any recommendations on these articles or send out the warrant is still unknown, and I don't think, not sure how optimistic anyone is that that'll happen, because that would be probably November 14th, but we are hopeful. Amy sent it in a week before the deadline to send in all the materials for that certification, which I think the deadline was September 30th. So certainly we had expected, I think, to have that number in a reasonable amount of time. The chair of the finance committee and I wrote a letter to DOR, just making, urging them to do what they can do to try to get it to us by we said the 14th, so that hopefully that the finance committee and that we could at least have one meeting where we have actual figures. I think that there's potential for some variance on what it could be, it sounds like, because of COVID. And so it's harder, it sounds like it's harder for staff to predict how DOR will treat certain amounts and whether that is part of free cash or not. So we need to wait for that number. So that impacts, currently we have, I think there are really 5 articles, not including capital, and four of them involve free cash. So right now it's a bit of a blank slate, but we can go through these, I think, and just talk about what they are. And certainly I think, and especially Sean, I think the like Article 5, we can talk about what that is and the purpose and everything. So I think if you guys, if you want, we can just go through each article and discuss the purpose of them.
Sure. I'm happy to just kind of step through the, Article 1 is amend appropriation for fiscal year 23 operating budget. That's this fiscal year's operating budget. Typically, this is housekeeping, but generally at the end of our annual town meeting in May, typically we get a number of charges from the state, either through charter schools or various bills that we have to adjust either at a special town meeting or the annual town meeting. We always kind of carry that amendment to the FY 23 or in whatever fiscal year we're in as a housekeeping line. We do have some charter school numbers that are different, and so we want to address those, and there are a couple of other lines that we want to address as part of the FY 23 budget. Article 2 is transfer of free cash to.
Sean, so on that, do we think at our next meeting we'll have that? I mean,
we will. I met with the finance team today, and they're putting together, finalizing a small table of budget adjustments that I will be able to send out to the board early next week.
okay.
The next is Article 2, approve transfer of free cash. This is over the last few years, we've looked at the town's financial position as we've looked at setting the tax rate. This gives us a chance to ensure that we're balancing the impact of a number of the capital projects, with, how our budget impacts the median and average single-family taxpayers. Prior to the approval of the new school in September of last year, we had a number of public meetings and presentations where we modeled the use of stabilization funds that we've put together over the last 5 years to help, build up the town's financial reserves. This was done strategically with the intent of using it to pay down a portion of the debt service for the new school so that we would really meter the impact of that debt service on Swampscott taxpayers. We talked about, putting rainy day funds aside or digging the well before you're thirsty. This was generally part of that long-range financial planning. And so we're currently modeling our tax classification hearing that we have annually. Our assessors have, our Board of Assessors approved the values last week, and I'm working with our assessor and our finance team to really look at what amount of free cash or what amount of stabilization we'd use to try to ensure that we're keeping a steady hand on what impact there will be for Swampscott taxpayers. Article 3 is the approval of free cash and transfer to our other post-employment and benefit funds, or OPEB funds. In a meeting today with the town finance team, we are going to be recommending that we remove that article. We haven't made a deposit into the OPEB funds over the last year, but we actually have a reasonable amount in the OPEB funds, and this is something I think we can better address at the annual town meeting. This is when we typically make these types of deposits into the town reserve funds, and just given that this is a special town meeting, I don't think it would be prudent to be making that deposit at this time. I think we can look at all the other financial priorities that we have as we build out the entire fiscal '24 budget, and we can then come back and make a decision about whether or not we make a smaller or larger deposit into this fund. Certainly it's something that we're mindful of. Our position with our OPEB funds is really what holds us back from that AAA bond rating. And while there's a small change in the interest rates, as the interest rates continue to ramp up, it continues to concern me that we're not recognized as we should be as a AAA community. And it may require us to kind of take a stronger look, but I don't think we should do that at this special town meeting.
So wait, so you're saying that you would prefer that we're doing it at annual town meeting?
I am. I think
But we didn't do it at the annual town meeting?
We didn't.
And then how does this?
We were trying to approve a new school, and I think our focus was really laser on how do we keep the budget tight? How do we, ensure that our financial position is as strong as it could be as we went out to market for bonding for this school and all those other fiduciary responsibilities that we have.
Are there any negative ramifications as far as our ratings go if it shows that we're not showing intent on putting something in?
I think it's always something that the rating agencies look at, and I think what's important is that we have OPEB trust fund. I think that shows our intent to actually address this, and I think they'll be looking at our commitment to actually paying that down and addressing this as a priority. And I think it's clear Swampscott has made it a priority, and we are going to continue to make it a priority, and we're going to continue to discuss it both as a town finance team and as our finance committee and as a community. But
I hear what you're saying, but I'm just a little concerned not putting anything in here. But I'm not kicking and screaming. I would just have to think about it more. There is a concern.
Yep.
Sean, do we have any, I know we typically have, was it actuaries to review this, this liability. Do we have a schedule as to when that is going to occur and what the interest rate changes will do to this
Yep.
number?
Every time the Fed changes the interest rates, it changes our actuaries' assumptions. So we do have a report. We typically, get that annually. I can get a copy of that to the board, and we can talk about what those assumptions are. I don't have it off the top of my head,
Sure.
but certainly happy to follow up at the next meeting with our Director of Finance Administration, our town treasurer, and dial into some of those assumptions. I will say, just as a town administrator that has to balance all of these, sophistries, I'll say, you know, you could probably find any actuary to kind of give you the worst case and best case, you know, assumptions. You know, we spend a lot of money paying for these other employment benefits. We pay as we go, and to somehow have the town penalized for not, you know, paying it all off right now, it's unfair for this generation. It's unfair for the next 10 years or 15 years of Swampscott residents that deserve better parks, deserve better infrastructure and better public amenities, to have to pay for the OPEB liabilities for the last 50 years that somehow we just, you know, didn't keep up with. You know, we've got to try to find a balance with addressing these in a very strategic way without, you know, losing our focus on some of those current investments that we should be making. It's frustrating, and we're in a better position than most, but it's still frustrating. Article 4 is the approval of, or the approve a transfer of free cash for collective bargaining agreements. This is to address the one union that we actually haven't settled with. I actually had a productive discussion with the fire department union yesterday. It's never, you know, clear as to whether or not we will be able to reach an agreement by budget submission for this special town meeting, but I do believe the parties are in good faith, and we are both working back and forth with proposals to try to get a contract before the select board and ultimately before this special town meeting.
And Sean, what is the pencil down date as to when that would need to happen for this to be on the warrant on December 5th?
It has to be 21 days before town meeting, so it's essentially, I believe it's November 14th or 15th.
So you have to have an agreement in place before, like, November 14th or 15th for this to?
It's advisory and not mandatory. And so the answer from town council is sort of.
Okay, so we could keep this in the warrant and go right down to the date and fill it in at the last minute?
That's what we've done in the past. You know, my experience is that a lot of these contracts ultimately just go to the, as they say, the courthouse steps. And, you know, these contracts are challenging. You know, we certainly, we've scheduled some time every week over the next few weeks to just try to work it out.
How far, when was this contract up?
It was up on July 1st of 2022.
And these are 3-year contracts?
Typically, they're 3-year contracts. They have been 1 year, but typically they're 3.
Got it.
Before we move on, Sean, Article 1, is that where we're making adjustments to the water and sewer budgets? Is that in Article 1, or is that a separate article? I thought we had to make
It is, it's Article 1.
the change in the assessments.
That's right,
Okay, so that's part of Article 1.
it is.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Article 5 is the establishment of a compensated absences reserve fund. I've met with the superintendent, and over the last few years, we've talked about the impact of a midstream retirement that we haven't planned for one police officer, one firefighter, teacher, long-serving employee. It can be as much as $50,000 to $60,000. And so when we kind of think about some of our smaller budgets, and we think about how these retirements can impact our operating budget, you know, we've discussed, you know, how can we avoid that kind of disruption? How can we, you know, be a little bit more careful with how we budget for these anomalies? And having a reserve fund that deals with these typical annual retirements. Some of them happen earlier because of medical reasons, sometimes they happen because of unplanned reasons, but having that compensated absent reserve fund is a best practice. It helps us ensure the integrity of our operating budget appropriations when we have unanticipated end of employments that happen earlier than we anticipate. Typically still have to manage to budget, and you know, that will put pressure on other operating line items. It puts a lot more pressure on the town side of the ledger than the schools, because we pay out the end of employment typically on the town side, and so if it's unanticipated, you know, it can be a unwelcomed impact.
So Sean, I'm assuming you've looked at 5 to 10 years of data, and 250 is the number based upon a high, a low, or an average, or what do you?
250 is it generally is about 5 employees, and I think that gives us the ability to, you know, if we need 2 or 3 in a year, I think it buys us some time before we replenish it. And I think if we benchmark 250, I think that's a reasonable allocation that would help us get through a fiscal year in a worst case kind of scenario. And then, you know, we could circle back around and, you know, we can use the average of, you know, 3 years. Typically with snowstorms, we budget, you know, the average of 5 years worth of snowfall, but you never know, you know, how many you're going to get one year. You know, it could be 4, it could be 3, it could be 1, you know, but it's a good number that I think helps us all feel like it's a good insurance.
But you're saying you actually you've looked at the last minimum of 5 years, what the average is that you're paying out, just on the town side, I'm not talking about school side.
It's typically town and school, because,
Well,
you know,
school, they have to ask in advance who's going to retire. Then there's a line item in the budget for that amount of, so are you asking for 250, and then is the school going to be giving back their line item?
It's my anticipation that, you know, they're going to still budget for the anticipated retirements or anticipated end of employments, and this is going to cover the unanticipated end of employment.
That was my understanding, having watched the finance committee, that this, on either side, wouldn't be replacing the budgeted amounts for the known retirements. It's more for the unexpected, if you have an unexpected wave, which can happen, to have that fund so it doesn't throw you upside down. That's the way
just give me an
understood
example. I've incentivized, I've tried to incentivize early retirements for a number of employees, and I've had to split their payment from one fiscal year to another just because we were trying to manage to budget, and I wouldn't be able to fund their end of employment without creating a budget issue. And so this gives us a little bit more flexibility.
Would the idea be that the number's 250 now, but would the idea be that it's sort of funded at 250, you know, and then if you have to dip into it, we try to replenish it to get back to 250?
It would. I think that's
at some time.
Yep.
Or, you know, if it's 250 or 3, but the idea isn't that necessarily that we're contributing $250,000 annually to this.
That's right.
This fund.
It's really a one-time. We're gonna leave it at 250, and you know, if it drops down to 200 next year, or if it stays at 250, we just leave it, and then when we have a year where it can be strategically advantageous, we rely on it because it will protect your operating budget.
So is it a fund for which, if you have unexpected retirement either at school or town, the expectation is you will automatically utilize it, or is it discretionary?
I'd say it would be discretionary, and I'd like to, think that we'd all, use our judgment to kind of ensure that we're kind of keeping that as a reserve, as a strategic way to balance the budget and keep, the line items in the operating budget.
But why would it be discretionary if somebody's retiring? Like, are you saying
Because,
hold up their money?
Well, no, it's
No,
not, this ensures that,
Make the school or town take out from their budget then, right?
yeah, I was thinking this would be just on the town side. The town would be making these decisions. I frankly would recommend that frankly this be the responsibility of the town administrator to make these decisions, because I wouldn't want a retirement to come up before a 5-member fragmented board and have it become a political conversation as opposed to an administrative conversation where we make decisions about whether or not it is in the town's best interest to incentivize early retirements or try to find a way to address the financial impact of a early end of employment. We get those situations that really can cause a significant impact to the town's operating budget. And so we're anticipating that we may have some of these issues, and we're trying to establish a reserve fund to help address that. We've talked about similar stabilization funds. These are stabilization funds to stabilize your operating budget. We talk about energy. We talk about, the impact of, the energy markets. If energy goes up by 14, 15%, or gas goes up by that, our operating budgets take a hit. And it would be helpful to have some energy stabilization fund to just offset whatever exceedance there is, so that small budgets, we have departments that have less than, $200,000 line items. Our senior center is $220,000, and, you get 4 retirements, you might hit $200,000, and we have to go and make deep cuts in small budgets that really make a huge difference in the quality of life of the community. And I'm trying to put some structural change into the town fiduciary tools to just ensure we don't have those types of problems. The easiest thing to cut are community programs or initiatives, and those are the things that matter most. And I'm trying to ensure those initiatives don't pay the price if we have an unexpected end of employment.
And this is a fund that is established through Mass General Law, so clearly these reserve funds could only be used for that purpose.
That's right.
Under that law.
KP Law has reviewed this. They've provided the language for that. Compensated absences reserve fund, they can only be used for end of employment.
My understanding too on the town side is that there are certain, contractually on retirements, there are certain provisions where whether it's sick days or vacation days, that can be a massive number.
Yep. For our teachers, for our police officers, for our firefighters, it's incredible.
The ceiling is high, right? It's
Over the years, we've tried to improve that through negotiations, but, frankly, it's one of the harder things to kind of claw back.
Okay, but this is also free cash.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Article 6 is appropriation for capital projects. The Capital Improvement Committee has met. They've reviewed these projects. I do have an update. I did meet with Max Casper, our facilities director, today, and we are going to withdraw the elevator modifications. He has met with the elevator vendor, and they do not believe that we need these modifications. At this point, there's a lower cost solution to the project that they were proposing. So it's another absolutely extraordinary contribution of Max Casper, our facilities director. He brought another vendor in, was able to learn a few things.
So we're sure about that.
We're sure about that. Yep. Yes, we are sure about
This is an elevator we're talking about.
that. We are sure about that.
Let's
If it needs to
not-
be modified.
Understood.
Let's not keep out on the
Not even
elevator,
a laughing
please.
matter, but I think, yeah, I mean, that's good news.
Yeah.
I
Be a
suppose.
pulley
but-
system, Max will operate
So
himself.
can I just ask you a question on the rehabilitation of Abbott Park? That's the park in front of Clark,
That's right.
and that looks like it's gonna be 200, just short of 209,000. Half of it's a grant. Is that $100,000 will be reimbursed in this current year, or how does that work?
It's my understanding that will be $100,000 in this fiscal year, but I can get some clarification from Marcy Glasgow for our next meeting. There's some paperwork with that grant that will outline when we will be reimbursed, if that extends beyond the construction closure of the project. I'm sure that, there's a date in there that will determine when final disbursement will be, and I don't know if that, will be in next fiscal year, or this fiscal year, but.
It's probably, well, Marzi will have the answer. I don't want to necessarily speculate, but it's probably just dependent on when we finish the project.
I also sent her an email that Republic, I copied you on that, Republic, our trash removal company,
Right.
has a special grant program for parks and things like that. She said she was gonna look into that, so.
Great.
So my next question is repairs to Town Hall Garage. Is this where there was a beer fest and the
Swamptoberfest, yep.
Swamptoberfest and the forklift went through? So that was the Swampscott Yacht Club, and the town entered into an event. The thing went through the garage floor. So is there a reason why this is $100,000? Wouldn't insurance cover that? Wouldn't insurance from Swampscott Yacht Club and the town cover that?
Yes, we are getting funds from insurance, but we have 2 garage bays, and we're gonna fix both of them. So it's roughly $100,000 for both sides, and we are assuming insurance will pay for one side, and the $100,000 will pay for the other side.
Is this totally on the town's insurance? Is Swampscott Yacht Club involved in this?
It's on the town's insurance.
Is there a reason why the other program that was involved, I mean, my understanding was this was a combined program, the profits were split, it was a group thing. I'm just wondering why this is completely on the town.
I'll go back and look to see if we can subrogate against the Swampscott Yacht Club if you would like. It's a small nonprofit. I'm certainly happy to see if they will pay
Well, it's not that they would pay, it's their, I'm
I know.
wondering if their insurance company picks it up.
And I'm assuming that their premium will, I'll go back and see if we can subrogate part of the claim on behalf of our insurance company. I would assume that our insurance company would chase them down if they thought they wanted to subrogate, but I'll look into that if you'd like.
Well, I mean, I would just like to know what's out there.
Understood. I did ask Max to look into a few different options. Right now, the plan is to fill in the void under the floor of the carriage house. It was built as literally a carriage house for horse and buggy. And the risk that, we would have another incident in the future, would be there. Although we were looking at some structural steel that perhaps we could put in that would continue to keep the space. The bottom floor, or the space underneath the floor, was a workshop for Elihu Thompson. And so he was one of our country's greatest engineers. his home's on the National Historic Register. It is the town hall, and to just simply fill that up seems like we might miss a piece of history, but
Have you has there been any attempt for getting a loan from, not a loan, but getting a grant from the state historic?
we haven't reached out to the state historic. At this point, we're just trying to repair that and fix it. We're looking at two different strategies. One will be to fill it and just, bring the carriage house back to productive use, and the other would be to construct some, underground storage and, help, bring that back to, some existing condition prior to the forklift falling through the floor.
What do we use it for prior to the forklift?
We actually store a bunch of plaques for the trees that we have around Town Hall, and it was just basically lost to time. There were some pieces of electronic equipment that I have no doubt that Elihu worked on down there. There was part of just, it looked like it was an old root cellar, and so there was just, it looked like there was some material that was just left
And
in the
what,
turn of the century.
what is the plan if we bring it back to usable space? What is the plan for it?
Roughly,
Museum.
we talked about
It's like
using one half for storage for the rec department, and the other half would be for a space that, highlighted some of Elihu's inventions and his workshop.
Are we talking about a space that you can walk down in and
Yes.
stand there? You can stand up in there?
Yes. You want to schedule a meeting in the
No.
basement?
Unless we get our BYOB with
All right.
We need headlamps, maybe.
Just do it.
headlamps.
Right.
The
So then the-
sailboats and the stand-up paddleboards, this is,
These have fallen into, the sailboats have fallen into disrepair. They have reached their life cycle. And this is an attempt to kind of get ahead of the season. I think we had an extraordinary summer season with the stand-up paddle boards. The thought was we'd go out and we'd actually get some additional boards, and we'd continue to, make this a lower cost and more available resource for the community, and certainly want to, just get ahead of the summer season.
Well, and for the sailboats specifically, I mean, we need to have those ordered
That's right.
now. Otherwise, if we wait until regular town meeting, there
They'll be
won't
coming
be
in
any, there
next
won't be any,
October.
yeah.
Is it upkeep on the sailboats or additional sailboats?
Additional sailboats.
Okay.
Well, the sailboats that are in the inventory right now, have
They're beyond
we
repair?
capitalized? Well, I don't know about the condition. I can just tell you we capitalized it maybe 12, 15 years ago. They're,
yeah, I think it's a necessary
all right.
upgrade.
Are any funds out of the revolving account being used for this?
We're looking for general fund, but I'm happy to look at using some of the funds out of the revolving account. I think we have some funds available there, so.
I think that question came up at Finance Committee, and I thought they had mentioned that the revolving fund is for programs and not capital items. So I don't know the answer to that, but I know they discussed it.
No, the revolving fund can be used for equipment too.
We can look into that. All right, next article is Article 7. This is acceptance of a public way. We had discussed this at our last meeting. This is before the planning board, and expect that this will be presented to town meeting by the planning board and our director, or our Department of Public Works.
So we should have the final language for this. There's no reason we won't on the 16th, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? Are there laws, like, what about sponsoring, this just goes back to the lesson, sponsoring a fleet? What about if North Shore Bank or someone like that wants to sponsor an entire fleet of sailboats? Do you have to send that out to an RFP?
We would. Generally, any type of public use of town property
Right.
would have to have a, public process to bid on. I can check into the thresholds. I think there are financial thresholds in terms of what the,
Like the Friends
Creative
of
facility.
the Friends of the Swampscott, what is it, Friends of the
Friends of
Swampscott?
Swampscott Sailing.
Sailing, wanted to have a fundraiser where you would sponsor a boat, maybe? Could that-
Well, they do a lot,
No, I know,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
but I'm just, if there is a company that wants to sponsor a boat, just thinking different.
yeah.
Creative ways. Mary Ellen,
You
you
have a
want a
sponsor?
company?
You never know.
Only if it's got a dog sale.
All right. I think that's it for the warrant for now, right? I think everyone is hopeful that we'll have as many details as possible within the next 2 weeks. And we'll keep you posted on the free cash.
Yeah, you know what, we have just one more question here.
Sure.
Did we have, last year, from the Springtown meeting, we had Joe Dulett put in a request for capital, and then I thought it was going out, we were gonna address it in the fall for equipment,
Like
for Zoom equipment?
Zoom
Upgrading?
upgrades or upgrades related to COVID and AV equipment, something like that.
For the auditorium.
I've met with Joe about the auditorium. We've talked about putting together a couple of capital projects, and I've always kind of gone into the special town meeting with this is a special town meeting, and there should be special projects. Some of the improvements for the cable. Public educational and government programs, I think should, can be part of the annual capital projects. And, with our licensing conversation that we're getting into, we're actually recommending that we generate some additional revenue from this license and perhaps future licenses with Comcast, and maybe a way for us to get some of the revenue for some of these projects through the cable providers. So
The only reason we're bringing it up is that it was left open at the annual town meeting.
Yeah.
So,
And perhaps it could be special because it falls into the category of being warranted by COVID. And so, unfortunately, it's necessary now. And if we wait another period of time, months, then we could be missing an opportunity to be helping kids and Joe out now.
I certainly am
So,
happy to meet back with Joe and talk to him about some of those priorities.
I did listen to a state meeting, and I do know that they're putting money on the side for grants for communities to apply for grants for
Great.
this type of stuff.
I'm a big fan of getting those grants.
Maybe even Republic wants to.
Republic, yes. Let's get as many grants out of Republic as possible.
All right.
Sometimes getting projects into the capital improvement program and having them sit there for a year or two gives us the ability to go out and get these grants. I think we've made tremendous improvements in our public educational government access. In fact, if we look at the budget over the last 5 years, it has been extraordinary. But, you know, Joe is certainly doing a tremendous job, and I'm happy to kind of, you know, see the auditorium at the high school really get that audio-visual upgrade, because we've talked about, you know, just bringing more events and music and
Right.
culture into that space.
So Joe is a panelist on Zoom for our next
Lo and
agenda item,
behold.
so we can. maybe
He
we
is?
can,
Speaking of
Joe, I don't know if
Joe.
you've been
Good thing we didn't talk about his surprise.
listening to this conversation. I don't know
I'm
if
listening. Can you hear me?
Hey,
Yes, we can.
Where are you?
I'm at home. I have COVID, so I'm at home.
Joe, are you safe? You look like you're in a basement. I mean,
Yeah, I got a target over my head here.
all right.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, our whole family got it, so we're all quarantined together. So emotionally, a little drained.
Feel better.
I'm saying this on a public meeting. I'm sorry.
I hope your family's not upstairs watching it.
yeah. So I don't know, Joe, we're about to launch into the television visioning committee update, but Mary Ellen and Katie were asking about a capital request from last spring annual town meeting for some upgrades that may have been postponed, that conversation. I don't recall, so I don't know.
Yeah, I actually brought it up again with Sean and I talked about it and trying to be more strategic about bringing this to the capital improvement committee. So Sean said it was okay for me to bring it up again, and Max Casper and I were kind of co-presenting this as a upgrade to facilities project, because the use of the auditorium is not solely for public access. In fact, the times that it's a public access venue are probably less than when it is used for other things, be they school or community events. But it is used for public access events, including town meeting. And so it's kind of a combined thing. So my latest presentation to the Capital Improvement Committee acknowledged that. They were supportive of it, and they asked me to do a couple of things. One was to kind of check back with the school committee on some of their feelings about it possibly being a space where if there were events, could we have like a single day beer and wine license so those events could bring in some money. The other thing they asked me to do was to talk to Jamie Marsh, who runs the Lynn Auditorium, and I actually had him come in and look at the space and give me some really good ideas about, what we could think about using it for. And then one last thing I need to do is really have a conversation with Jim Pierce, who runs the theater program here at the high school, so that any efforts that we might, consider for the space don't really trump his use of the space as an education environment. So there's a lot of good thought on it. It was on the Capital Improvement Committee for last year. We talked about it, discussed it, thought about it even more. So I think it's, like as Sean says, it sits there for a year or two. Not only can we think about some grant opportunities, but we also can think about more, I think, appropriately what the ultimate use will be of this. But ultimately, it's an 18-year-old space that needs a lot of upgrades. The lights and the sound are in tough shape, so in some way it needs to get upgraded. I just like to do it a little bit better if possible, so that we can make it a space that could be used for community events that include some nice sound aspects.
Can we name? Do we have the ability to name the auditorium if we wanted to say have the Phelan Auditorium and the Phelan family wanted to, put X amount of dollars out for this auditorium? Do things like that, are things like that in the public sector? How does that work?
Yeah, there are communities that have set up boards, and they've allowed businesses and sponsors to buy sponsorship. And so we could look at a policy that would help, the town generate revenue. You got to kind of think, do you want your public places and spaces named after businesses? And yes, I'm just saying.
Right, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'm just,
as a policy, we have to kind of think about that, because all of a sudden you'll have names, brand names on everything. You can travel around and see communities that do that. Worth a conversation.
One thing we did is, in the high school there's a gallery that was named after the class of 1965, because they donated a chunk of money to redo that gallery. Mike McClung and I have kind of made it a goal for ourselves to raise money from our respective classes, class of 79 and class of 89. So I think that conversation could be had for the auditorium if we do raise enough, how could we make sure that those classes get, at least noted in there is a chart on the wall when you walk in that has seats named after people that donated to the theater, but the theater itself is just called auditorium right now. So it's an ongoing conversation. I'm supposed to report back to the Capital Improvement Committee, and it's like a 2-3 phase project. That I also did talk to Marzi Alaska about getting some grant support as a way to upgrade the audio for audiences that are hard of hearing. To think of it that way, she said it could be a creative way to raise some money for that space, because the acoustics in that room are just horrible. So it's sometimes hard to hear a lot of that. There's a lot of people in there.
So Joe, I don't know if you heard what I had shared, but when Joe first brought this issue or this project to me, my first inclination was like, well, all new capital projects have to sit and wait. We don't fund things in the first year. We have a 30-year capital. We've got to build some discipline in it so we can actually chase grants. It helps everybody, prioritize and really get the ideas set so that we can allow these projects to mature. It's a great idea. It's a great project. It's a needed project. But, are we ready to move forward? We're going to talk about a contract with Verizon that talks about brand new revenue streams to the town that might be targeted for potentially, some of these uses. I do think what Joe said was important. Like, it's not going to be exclusively PEG, and so there is a public component to this. There's an educational component. There's a general government component, and so we should figure out what's the amalgamation and how do we pull that scope together that really makes sense.
I just wanted to make sure the conversation was still ongoing. That's all, and I'm glad to hear it is.
Okay, I think we're going to move on. Yeah, sure.
I just want to remind the history of the school. I was on the school building committee as an ex officio member. When we designed the school here, it was a deliberate. It was designed so that this part of the school was all public access, and that the school could be closed down at night, where the classrooms are. And the intent always was to have events, and to have music from outside and dance and have, and there was also talk at some point of, and some policies, I think if you look back, around how to contract with outside people to rental. There was a whole rental policy that I don't know where that ended up. So I think that the intent, at least in the terms of how this was planned and designed and all of that, and from the very beginning, the acoustics, Joe is right, the acoustics have not been great, because it started becoming like, well, what's the best we can do with, trying to keep within the budget. But I think this is an area that can get very touchy, that I think that school, public government kind of balance, I think I don't think it should go into that kind of territory, and I think that the more that we can make it so that we have work around everybody's needs, the town side and the school side, is going to be important. But the acoustics are terrible. If anybody goes to town meeting, it can be really, really hard. And I think this is where relying on someone like Joe's experience, we're very fortunate to have him. I've been totally impressed with the kinds of work that he does. And I just, as somebody who has historic memory, and my memory's not great on this, but Joe Markarian would be a good person to tap into, because he was the chair of that committee, and he has like a mind like a he can remember all these details, but please review that when you're looking.
Joe just got appointed to the Earth Removal Committee, so we'll reach out to him. And
Thanks.
Thank you for that. It's actually, I was trying to be in touch with someone from the original kind of development of this to really understand what the mission was of the space, so that we could make sure we were honoring it.
so Joe, I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly. Did you say that you could actually buy a seat in the auditorium and name, like, so somebody, like somebody by the name of Fletcher could actually buy one of those seats? And
I mean, it happened before I was here.
that's what
when
we
you walked
did.
in.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we did.
On the left door.
Is there, so there is,
Yeah.
awesome, yeah.
All right. So, in keeping with the theme of the great work that Joe's been doing, we're going to move on to
Wait till I'm
the
not there.
Swampscott,
I know, right?
Swampscott Television Visioning Committee. Update on the Verizon contract negotiations, and I think a potential vote on this contract. So am I turning it over to Joe on this one?
Yes, I was just gonna just frame it. Joe has been working really with Attorney Hewig from KP Law to just go through the contract renewal. This is a process that is heavily regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. It's a pretty standard process. Every community that has a cable subscriber has to go through a FCC ascertainment hearing process that involves public hearings, and Ethan has actually done a terrific job working with Joe and helping us negotiate and navigate this contract. There are a number of really important improvements to our Verizon contract that Joe will go over, and I'm really pleased at the end result of their terrific work.
And I'll just point out that David's been our point of contact and member of this visioning committee, so has also been heavily involved in this work with Joe.
And Neil, Ethan is here also, and I had asked him to prepare a presentation, a short presentation, of what his work is. So I don't know if you want him to go after we talk about the contract, or if you want him to start. Why don't
we talk to Ethan now, and then we'll talk about the contract? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. If
Okay.
Ethan's cool with that.
He's made his way down to the front row.
All right.
I don't think I need to tell you to use the microphone.
Yeah, Ethan, if you don't,
Although now that you're in front of
if
the
you don't
camera.
speak loud
I
enough,
got one right here, I'm all ready.
people are gonna get perturbed.
Yeah.
You have to speak loud.
Yep, thank you. So I know some of you I haven't really met before. I'm Ethan Runstadler. I've worked in the television program for a while now. I actually moved to Swampscott about a little over 10 years ago now. And I've been working with Joe throughout my time I was at the high school. I graduated in 2019, and then when I came back from school after the pandemic started, I started working on developing some new programs with Joe. And recently I went full-time over the summer in June as the assistant cable TV coordinator. So, so I just made a little short presentation here just to show sort of what we've done throughout the pandemic and sort of what some of our plans moving forward are for especially the public access channel, which is what the Verizon contract is about. So first major thing we've done is during the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of requests for sports to be covered for the high school teams. So I started working on that program in the fall of 2020.
Ethan, I'm not seeing your presentation. I'm seeing the television visioning committee one. I don't know if it's the wrong screen is shared.
If you go to the other Chrome tab, the one to the left there.
This one?
Yep. And then present in the bottom.
There you go. Thanks.
Perfect. Yep. Cool. So we have, so it was really sort of fueled by the need that the pandemic created. And since we've started it, we've sort of expanded our ability. We now have a satellite studio down at Bloxage Field that we use to produce the events down there, as well as the football games, which we like to do a little bit more production. And this is all fueled by the students. Right now we have approximately about 30 active student employees who take part in the sports production as well as the meetings, like tonight. And over the past 2 years, we've done about 150 broadcasts total of sports. The next thing we've done is sort of throughout the pandemic, we've obviously needed to improve our meeting broadcasts and sort of our ability to do hybrid meetings. So we live streamed the select board, school committee, zoning board, and planning board meetings all from here, usually. But we've also developed some more hybrid spaces over that time. So we now have the senior center is a fully hybrid space with 4 cameras similar to this room. And then the town hall and the police station are at a lesser capacity, but we're piloting some new options right now to get some more hybrid spaces throughout the town. And then finally, the public access is sort of the main thing that I'm diving into now. So what we're hoping to do is really sort of involve the community in the coming year as we get this new Verizon channel, which will be sort of up and running by the summer, we hope. And so our goal with that is to sort of work in some community workshops where we can sort of educate community members on how to use the vast amount of equipment we have for production, and to sort of put that to use to create some more locally originated content for the public channel. And so that will be the main focus of what we're producing for the public access channel that the Verizon contract will give us. And then the last thing, the most recent thing, is we have a new website, which I've been working on. Diane, if you wanted to click on that, we could take a quick look. So it's swampscottma.tv, similar to the government website, just .tv instead of .gov. And here you can access all of our YouTube channels as well as the live feeds from the government and educational access channels
Great.
at the moment. So, yeah.
Ethan, it's awesome. It's amazing for me to kind of just see where we've come over the last just few years. I think through the pandemic, covering those additional games was so critically important. You actually brought so many people to these events that they never would have been able to see, and it really, really helped assuage a lot of the loneliness and a lot of the disconnect that I think a lot of people were feeling during the pandemic. Joe and frankly, you both took on an enormous amount of additional work. Like, that was not part of our regular routine, and to think about ways that, you know, we use this public educational and government access. We've done a pretty good job at the educational, but the public and government, you know, we're starting to videotape so many more of the government, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, all the events that, you know, folks really want to see that may not be able to get to, you know, is making a huge difference in helping Swampscott not be as lonely and as disconnected. And that's a huge benefit. I know sometimes people think, oh, it's local origination. It's just cable. It's not. It actually is vitally important.
Yep. And I'll just put out there for anyone listening, you know, we are really trying to push forward with the local origination stuff. So we want to hear from community members about their ideas and what they'd like to see on cable channel. We did a survey as part
Cooking
of our
shows. Anybody
cooking
got a special
shows.
talent? Anybody know how to yodel?
Yep.
You know, we need all those
all of them.
Do
We
you,
want to hear them.
skills.
do you have that link on the town website? And
For the new website, we
Right.
do not yet, actually.
when do you think we could have that on the?
I'm not sure. I will send an email
That
to
sounds
the,
like a gauntlet.
the tech people
Yeah.
at town and get that up there
That'd be
as
great.
soon as possible. Yeah, and there's contact forms on that website that you can send us an email with. So
Great job.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks, Ethan. It's a long time coming to say congratulations on being full-time. We're really happy that you're officially full-time and that we have that support. And I echo what Sean said. I mean, you guys kept the town running over the pandemic, and it's really appreciated. And we certainly take the work that you guys do for granted, and just sort of assume that these things work, but we all do know how much work it takes behind the scenes, so thanks a lot.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. Anyone have any other questions for me? Okay.
Nope.
Well, we can go to Joe's presentation now.
All right, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. Nice job. So the Swampscott Television Visioning Committee is really kind of wrapping things up, possibly tonight. It's been a long process, and the whole process really gives the town a chance to look at its contract with Verizon and think about, is it serving the community needs? We reach out to, there's different phases of this. Ascertainment is an opportunity for us to really kind of make sure that what we're doing with our cable providers is serving the needs of the community. It's kind of funny because it's a time when a lot of people are kind of cutting the cord on cable, so we did find out through our survey that a lot of people were doing that. They kind of stopped paying for it because it was too expensive. But that's something that we have to consider as we move forward as a town over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So phase 1 was kind of doing the community survey. Phase 2 was a negotiation. We can go to the next slide. That's really the introduction of all the phases. I'm just seeing a blank. Oh, I see. There's fancy animation on that. Nice job, Sean. So I do want to thank David for being the liaison of this committee and helping me through this. And Attorney Hewig, is just a master at this stuff. He's negotiated so many of these. So his work, he couldn't be here tonight. He was sorry he couldn't be here tonight, but his work is so invaluable to make this run smoothly, and his understanding of the process is fantastic. The next slide just talks us through ascertainment, which is the process that wrapped up really last October, where we did solicit input from the community. We did a survey. It gives us the opportunity to meet with community organizations, review complaints, look at our service area, but our service area we're pretty densely populated, so it's not hard for the cable providers to get to all the people in town. And then to look at other cable licenses, we did a lot of comparing between the Verizon and the Comcast one, and that comes up later in the presentation. We can go to the next slide.
It's not moving.
Not moving. Maybe there's more fancy animation coming up. I'll talk about it while we wait for it to go. But the ascertainment, which was phase 1, was to kind of make sure that we reached out to the community and make sure that we had some evidence-based feedback from our community, which was primarily a survey. We got 223 responses back, and the number 1 request was more local programs. But that was not matched by the number of people who wanted to create the programming. but that's okay, because you want your audience to be bigger than the number of people that are creating it. So
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Yeah. We felt like we got enough people who said they wanted to create programming that we could, we thought it was realistic to start a public access station to get people in, because the number of people said, yeah, I would make programming, and the number of people that said they'd watch it, like, this makes sense. Let's give this a shot. So we did have a meeting. We held a community meeting. You guys, I think many of you guys were in attendance to that one. So we can go to the next slide. That kind of satisfied our requirements for the ascertainment phase of the negotiations. Just some things to note: there are some things that we can negotiate, and there's some things we can't. We can't negotiate the service or the fees or the programming itself. That's the cable providers can dictate that, but we can negotiate the capital and operational funding, and we can compare licenses in our community to other communities. And so we did do that. We can go on to the next slide. So the negotiations have been going on for about a year, and this was really Attorney Hewig's expertise in going back and forth with Verizon's attorney. This was about 10 months. and if our license ran out in November of 2021, so we're beyond the term of that, but the contract continues, so we've been getting paid the same as we had in the previous one. And we believe what we have tonight is the best cable TV renewal license that we can get. So we can move on to the next slide. We did ask for 5%, so we're allowed. We were at 2.7% with Verizon, and we wanted to get to 5. We are unique, I think, in a way that we didn't have a public access channel. So we said, well, we want 5 because we want to add public. We also asked for an extra channel, and we wanted that to be an HD. Attorney Hewitt said that that's standard for Verizon to be giving out now. And we wanted a 5-year renewal license term because that's pretty much what they're giving. So what we ended up getting, you can go to the next slide. We ended up getting a 5-year contract. We ended up getting 3.1%, and that matches what Comcast is giving us. Verizon was very much about, we'll give you what Comcast gives you. And so when we start to negotiate with Comcast, which will start right after this, we're going to ask them for 5%. And Verizon said that we will increase or decrease the amount that we give you based on what you get from Comcast. So if we can get 5 from Comcast, Verizon will give us 5 as well at that point. We also asked for $17,000 a year in capital. We ended up getting, I think, $13,500 every year for capital. So that'll give us $69,000 over the course of the 5 years for, I think, what will now be probably maintenance, because we've added so much new equipment over the past 5, 6, 7 years that we're going to need money to maintain this fleet of gear. And we did get the 1 HD channel, which we have to request right after the contract is signed, and then they'll give it to us in 270 days. So that gives Ethan a chunk of time to get everything ready and get programming ready to go. Next slide, please. So that's basically it. Things to note is that we feel the best that we could in the market now. We do need to make sure that we understand that people cut the cord daily, and that revenue that we get, which totals right now about $180,000 between Comcast and Verizon annually, is decreasing by 5% each year is what I'm estimating. Phase 2 actually will end tonight if the contract is signed. And if you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer. And Sean is also a wealth of information on this. He's done so many of these and so many times. This is actually my first time going through one of this. So Sean, I appreciate the support on doing this.
Joe, I really think that you've done better than I've done on any of them, and you should do the Comcast one as soon as possible. I would encourage you to reach out to Comcast next week. You don't have to wait until it expires. You can just bring it to the table. The work that you're doing is extraordinary, and frankly, I agree with your assumption that this is the best deal that we can get, because the landscape with telecommunication is completely changing, and locking in a contract with Verizon today, I think, does give us the ability, at least over the next 5 years, to have something secure. It's the bird in the hand, and Joe's point about the people cutting the cord. That's the future of telecommunication. There will be no more landline cable companies in the future that, frankly, I see, and we're gonna likely be doing away with these types of contracts.
Joe, I just wanted to thank you and thank Ethan and thank the other members of the Television Visioning Committee for their service and for their input. I did have a question about other funding sources, because as we had talked about this as a committee, and I believe in front of the select board several months ago, you had mentioned there was a piece of legislation in that was maybe getting some traction at the State House regarding streaming services, and that could essentially be a plug or additional funding for public access as we move forward into a streaming world of 5G. And I just wanted to see if there was an update that you had for us there with that particular piece of legislation.
I don't have the most updated information on that. I know it got out of committee. I'm not totally certain, but I'm pretty sure it got out of committee, which means that it could be going in front of the full legislature. But some other stuff came up that was related to cable issues that I think kind of took the fire from that one. But I can get more information on that. I don't have the most updated. I apologize for that.
I don't know.
It's a bill that would require streaming and entertainment streaming services to provide revenue to the state as a direct response to the loss of cable revenue. And this has been kind of pushed a couple of times through the legislature, and it hasn't gotten out of committee. But then the state would kind of divvy it up to communities as a way to supplement what they're losing from the cable revenue.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of traction for it, and I'll get the latest information and I will update you. I apologize I don't have it tonight.
So I have a quick question. So you have an offer from, my understanding is you have an offer from Verizon, and now you're gonna go and negotiate with Comcast. Is there a reason you just don't put out, a needs page to both of them and say, what's your best deal? Like, because if Verizon is saying, okay, well, we'll give you what Comcast is gonna give you, why not just give it all to Comcast? I mean, whoever's gonna ante up first.
I don't think we should discuss strategy openly in a public.
You're right. You're right, but I was just interested.
There is a reason, and I'm
Okay.
happy to share it with you
All right, good.
later.
I trust.
I have a question about the public access channel. Is there a way to access it if you do not have Verizon or Comcast, or is that the issue? One of the issues?
We, all of our channels are online, so you can access our channels, and they actually look better online because our channels at Comcast and Verizon, we only have SD channels on their feeds. So you can watch all of our programming through our TV website, which you can now access through Ethan's easy to find responsibility.tv website.
Right.
And I'll be able to access Mary Ellen's yodeling program on there as well when it comes to fruition.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
You might even be filming it.
That is quite a nice website, by the way.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Joe, what's the, I'm just curious, what's the breakdown between Verizon and Comcast in Swampscott? Like,
That's a
you
great
know?
question. I know we have 2,000 Verizon subscribers. I think it's pretty even because we
It
get
is.
similar checks from each one, and it kind of breaks down the same way. So I think it's split.
Caesar Milan.
okay.
Yeah.
And so this,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's fine. No, that's what
Oh, go ahead.
thought it might be like a 50-50 thing. I just was curious if one was proportionally significantly more than the other. Is this capital, this 69,000 in capital over the next 5 years, that's coming from the Verizon contract, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the subscribers pay for it, which is
Right.
standard. And I did just find the numbers. It looks like we've got about 600 Comcast subscribers and about 950 Verizon subscribers in town.
Oh, okay,
A few more on the Verizon side.
okay,
But yeah, the capital money would come in 3 installments, one in about a month and a half after the contract's signed, and then a year after, and then 3 years after. So it kind of gets dispersed over the term of the contract.
okay.
And we have a reserve, it's an enterprise account, so that just kind of goes in there. And then when I submit my budget, I use the revenue that we get to try to cover all my operating expenses, and then I use the capital for any new equipment or projects or maintenance.
Got it. It's staggering to me that the idea that they're providing a HD channel is like is that supposed to be?
Like a big give.
Yeah, I mean, is that?
Really? I'm like, really?
Yeah.
One in like 9 months?
Thanks, but no, I appreciate all the work you guys have been doing. I mean, I feel like the first time you presented on this was like,
A year ago.
yeah, at least.
Longer.
Yeah, longer. I feel like it was like it feels like when we first got on the select board, but maybe it wasn't that long ago. But I know it's been a long process, so thanks for all the work you guys have been doing.
Absolutely, and Attorney Healy a lot of it has been his back and forth with the Verizon attorney in the last definitely like 6-7 months.
Okay, so I think,
Is the request that we approve the contract?
yeah, the request is that we approve this contract tonight, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, it's you had mentioned the possibility of it happening tonight or happening if they wanted to do a second read.
Yeah, I had originally been under the impression that we would do a second read, but if somebody wanted to move that the select board grant the town cable television renewal license to Verizon New England Incorporated on the terms contained in the November 2nd, 2022 copy provided to the board, that would approve the contract, and we would send it off to Verizon for their signatures as well.
I would make such a motion.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Yay, thank
Nice
you guys.
work.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you, congratulations.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
get out of the bunker.
I'm out tomorrow with a mask, so I'm getting out fine.
Joe, thank you for shepherding this all along.
Absolutely, yeah,
Really
my pleasure.
appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Looking forward to the next one.
All right.
Have a
Reach
good
out
night.
to them tomorrow.
I will. Good night, you guys. Thanks.
Night,
Good
thanks,
night.
Joe. Okay, next is the consent agenda. Consent agenda is routine miscellaneous items that the board can approve all at once. And tonight we have the approval of minutes from our June 16th, 2021 and September 13th, 2021 meetings, as well as our meeting from our last meeting of October 19th, 2022. I don't know why these 2021 meetings weren't approved. I'm not sure. I think it just,
I didn't work here, so.
yeah, I know. I don't know. Diane brought it up, so I'm not sure
Not
why they slipped through the cracks, but we're, and I know the question often arises of, I do know that you can approve minutes even if you weren't on the board or at the meeting, which is strange, but it's true. I don't know if anyone had any questions about any of the minutes that we have in our packet, or any changes.
I have a question on one of them, just, it's on, under aggregate industries. It says Mr. Spelios reiterated the need to have a portal to collect information within 45 days. Do we have that portal?
We have a C-click fix system, but I don't believe that's the system that Peter was looking for.
Okay, so I guess he's looking for some type of a vehicle to collect information.
Yeah, I did discuss that with town staff. They felt like having a redundant, software system would be confusing and difficult for a number of residents. We have a C-click fix. People do use it. We have, emails for town staff, and frankly, we want people to go, if they have a complaint, and file a complaint with the fire department if it really is a serious issue with their property.
Wait, so should they be filing a complaint with the fire department or filing a complaint using C-click fix? Because this is the whole confusing aspect of this.
With the fire department, if there's damage to the property, under the state, laws regarding blasting, that's really where, the complaint should go. We do collect information on C-click fix, so if people do say, hey, there was a blast, I have damage to my house, we will have the fire department contact them. And so it's a good tool to help ensure that we collect, complaints from residents that are impacted by blasting.
And Diane, is it possible that we could include that information in future newsletters?
Yep.
Please.
Absolutely.
So, it appears that Mr. Spelios was looking for information to get out there. Would that box be checked off? Is that information getting out there?
From what,
He's saying reiterate the need to have a portal to collect information within 45 days.
we didn't actually we didn't go out and buy a different software portal for that. I do think that we presented some information about that C-click fix, but I can go back and look into this and see. I know Marzi had done some work to try to do some outreach to the community about reporting complaints about the blasting.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't want to try to characterize what Peter was trying to say at that meeting, but I
wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, but, but I think that I would agree that what he's requesting hasn't changed. So I don't think
we did have meetings.
What he
I did
wants.
meet with staff. I met with the fire chief and number of department heads, and frankly, it was their recommendation that we continue to use C-click fix because that has been widely used and software system that the town pays for to help collect complaints on any number of issues that residents have concerns with. And we wanted to continue to use that as a software system to be responsive to residents' concerns on any number of issues.
Okay. And I have something to add on to Diane on October 19th, 2022. Would you just add under number 2, Town Administrators FY '22, Ms. Fletcher commented that her evaluation was based on 8 weeks and she's looking forward to next year's. The end of part of that sentence should have been tackling opportunities for next year.
Say it again.
Tackling opportunity for next year.
Thank you.
anything else?
Motion
Okay.
to approve the consent agenda?
Hold on, I have one little change, Diane, on the October 19th. It's just on item 7, on land acquisitions updates, the last line. It's not David, it's me, P. Kane. It says P. Kane, David Grishman, and Peter Spelios are working to hire a design firm to help, and it should be P. Kane, Neil Duffy, and Peter Spelios. That's all. But other than that, I'm good. Sorry. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes discussed?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right, moving on to the town administrator's report.
So last week I did speak with Attorney Sims to schedule additional discussions with Aggregate Industries. We have been tracking blasts for Aggregate, and they're really approaching their 50 blast limit, so we will be sending them a notice that that is the extent of what they're allowed to blast under our existing permit. Past week, we received a proposal to develop the General Glover site. I met with a number of the department heads and historic commission to tour the property along with the planning board this past Thursday. Marzi has also been working on an update to our housing production plan and our climate action plan. Our master plan expires in 2025, and that is next up on a list of important reports to update. It's really impressive to me that over the last few months, we've filled over 30 vacancies and we've made over 40 reappointments to committees. I want to thank Diane for shepherding a lot of these appointments. I have interviewed every one of the individuals, and I really can't say enough about the extraordinary citizens that volunteer their time to serve the town of Swampscott. This is a democracy. Without them, this government does not work, and it's important for us to really continue to reach out to younger citizens and older citizens and everybody in between that want to contribute to Swampscott. Again, I mentioned this last meeting, but really thrilled about the work to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Recognition Month. We have a number of speakers, and we have our Historic Commission is bringing author Emerson Baker to the library on Sunday, November 12th at 11:30 to talk about an Indigenous peoples that inhabited Swampscott in Essex County a millennia ago. Our library has been busy making promotions and hiring. We recently made a conditional offer to a Ukrainian immigrant, and certainly looking to continue to work to build a more inclusive workforce for Swampscott. Our building department has taken in a permit for aggregate industries in the amount of $344,000 to replace aging equipment with modern, efficient equipment. Expect another few checks for developments that are sizable that will add to the town's revenue this year. We won't see that until next year, but certainly these are significant payments. Our town clerk is busy coordinating, early voting in anticipation for the general election next Tuesday, November 8th at the high school. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We certainly, we mentioned earlier, we did receive news that the Attorney General has approved the bylaw for the rezoning of the Glover site that allows us to move forward with the purchase and sale of the Hawthorne. Our Recreation Department is busy running a number of fun and inclusive programs for our community. We had a wonderful town hall toddler trick-or-treat. We haven't had that for 2 years, but it was just great to see, our citizens 5 and under running through town hall, getting as much candy as they could grab a hold of, and it was really impressive to see how many of our town hall employees dressed up in costumes to ensure that we actually had such a magical day. Perhaps next year, a few of my select board colleagues could join us for a few hours in a costume or two.
Would love to.
I sent my representative Stella down. She was there for me.
That's great. Let's see. Our Department of Public Works has been busy doing a lot of cleanup around town properties. Last week, I did take a drive around town with our DPW Director and Assistant Town Administrator Gino Cresta. We looked at the conditions of the town's fields and roads and public places. We did identify that we had some benches that were in need of maintenance. I've mentioned to Gino I want to be on these monthly inspections, just be out and about, and just want to just let folks know if you see something that needs to be repaired, please reach out to us. We want to make sure we have a status of good repair. We especially want to make sure that the parks are kept in good repair. We have a lot of people visiting Swampscott. We don't want them to be sitting on benches that are broken or things that we could just maintain. Gino is busy coordinating improvements to Kings Beach and repairs to our seawalls, and certainly we have a busy schedule of spring paving that we are pulling together. We are working on a presentation for the select board to see in advance of the spring paving so that we can publicly present on which roads that we will be paving, and we can talk a little more about our road surface management system that allows us to empirically look at the condition of each road. So we're not paving the worst roads
first. We're actually paving the roads that folks drive on most, and we're looking to get the maximum value out of that pavement preservation. So it's a little bit of a different methodology, and I realize that there are folks that have some roads that need to be paved, but we don't go with the worst first methodology. We go to how do we pave roads that most residents drive on and maintain those roads so that we can maintain everybody's cars. So we don't lose the value of those dollars. Last week, as I mentioned, we had a staff meeting at Andrews Chapel. We are moving around with staff meetings. We're just going to different town buildings, police station, fire station, Andrews Chapel, and library. I would recommend at some point the select board do the same. It's helpful to just be out and about. I know we can't do that for every one of our meetings, but you know, once a year we should be at each of the town properties, including the fire station, police station, and library. I do want to just recognize the men and women of the Swampscott Police Department and those on the North Shore who took part in the major drug bust on Tuesday morning along the North Shore. Swampscott had a number of residents that were swept up in that event, and it is important for us to just recognize we have drugs in our community. We have dangers in our community. We have threats to safety, and you know, the men and women for the police department do an outstanding job keeping us safe, but we should all be vigilant, and we should just make sure that if we see something, we say something. You know, we have a lot of individuals that unfortunately have been swept up in drugs and prescription drugs and alcohol, and all of that is a tragic combination, and we don't want to lose anybody that is caught up in those types of addictions. So
Was that a $2 million, is that the one in the paper that said $2 million
that's right.
worth of drugs?
That's right. Yep. It's alarming, and it's worth talking about. We've got to be more vigilant as a community. Really pleased with the work of our solid waste committee. They are truly as busy as bees. They're trash talking everywhere. It's actually exciting to see a group of individuals so passionate about really getting ahead of the curve when it comes to our environmental responsibilities. We've had some tough conversations with solid waste, but these are really positive. They're doing a Take the Trash survey. I would encourage folks to go to the town website and look for the survey, or look at the QR code that we have up on our website, and attend the farmers market, and really contribute to the solid waste committee's efforts to really think cleaner and greener. You know, change is never easy, but these kinds of best practices will help Swampscott really lead the way. And we're already ahead of the curve, as we've come to understand, in terms of getting to our waste thresholds. And, you know, I think as we kind of pivot to the future, I think we can do even more that would help identify some of those best practices. Our Assistant Town Administrator and Director of Human Resources has been very busy filling vacancies in Public Works and Library and a number of town departments. And we have a busy month of veterans programs. I have met with our veterans agent, Mike Sweeney, yesterday, and we've talked about a celebration of life for Captain Jennifer Harris that will be this weekend on November 6th Saturday, November 6th at 11 a.m. There's a heroes meal for Thanksgiving that we will be bringing to Swampscott veterans, and we continue to have monthly meetings with the Veterans Council or crossing organizations, and really pleased with the work and the collaboration. It's hard to keep some of these groups together, but they're staying together, and I want to just recognize that, when they stay together, they start working together. When they start working together, they start to really make a huge difference in impacting lives of some of our veterans that we have yet to really connect with. Just like our senior center, it's important to kind of understand less than 20% of Swampscott senior citizens have ever been in the senior center. And so 80% of our seniors have never been down to really get the benefit of the meals or the programs or the individuals that are down there. Similar with our veterans. We have 600 veterans, and we likely have not seen, hundreds of them at our VFW. And we've got to find a way to get to them and get them engaged. First, we need them. We need them to help us with other programs and initiatives, but we want to make sure that they do not feel isolated or underappreciated.
Is it possible to get the town nurse on a regular schedule down there?
It is.
And the veterans agent?
And one of my, veterans agent has been going down there. I got a report that he had one of the best attended events that they've had down there 2 weeks ago. I have always been, since I started, I've been an advocate of having our nurse go down there. The first year I was here, I asked our nurse to have an office space down there, and I was told that there was no space. I've been very pleased that our new full-time director has said she will make space for the nurse. The nurse right now is busy giving flu shots. Once we get through the flu shot season, she will schedule regular hours at the senior center because, as I've believed since I started this job, it's important to have a nurse available to some of our residents that most need a nurse to help advise, guide, and support them.
Right. So what I'm requesting is the nurse be there 2 days a week, 2 hours on a regular schedule so that...
I'm going to work with my department head and my public health nurse to kind of figure out what makes best sense for them right now, and then I'll report back and let you know what they may be able to do. But certainly they will be able to do something.
And the veterans agent, I'm talking about a regularly scheduled time, like lunch, whatever.
Absolutely.
But people knowing that every week they could go down and the veterans agent is going to be down there like 12
Every
to 2.
week, residents will know that they will be able to speak to a veterans agent and a nurse. That's absolutely going to be
That'll be great.
A standard.
That'll be great.
Sean, I had two questions for you. One comment, one question. So I think it's fantastic that the AG, that we're moving forward with the Hawthorne. Do we have a closing date as of today that we can update, share with the public?
We don't have one yet. My guess is we'll have one tomorrow. We want to schedule that ASAP. I have to work with the Athenases. We have to make sure that we line up schedules, but certainly that's coming together.
Okay, no, fair enough. And then, I see that Aggregate filed a permit, and there's a $344,000 permit fee. I would love to have further conversations and discussions about a portion of these fees above and beyond a certain threshold be invested in affordable housing and affordable housing projects.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I think once we get our free cash certified, I think as a board, we should sit down and talk about, how do we allocate something to affordable housing?
There has to be a recurring.
These funds will trickle back into next year's free cash, and so I think we can start to think about, we're budgeting $425 of new growth into the budget, but maybe there needs to be an update to the financial policy that we have that says every year maybe we should establish a deposit into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. What are our values as a community, and let's think about ways that we get beyond the rhetoric with affordable housing. Put some of our financial resources to the priorities that I believe we all share.
It's called putting your money where your mouth is.
That's right.
I think there needs to be some serious education about really what is affordable housing and all the different categories.
I agree with you, but I think we've got to get busy. You know, I think we've talked a lot about affordable housing, and I think we have to do both. I think we have to start building, and we need to be driving some of the projects. We work with too many adverse developers, and we're going to continue to work with too many adverse developers unless we get a handle on how we become leaders in driving the friendly, affordable housing projects that make sense for Swampscott. And so we need that land use board summit to really kind of think about, where does it make most sense? Where does an affordable housing investment make sense for a number of neighborhoods that have yet to, you know, share in the responsibility for building a more inclusive and more affordable housing option for Swampscott. It can't just be a neighborhood that's behind the tracks, or, you know, neighborhoods that chronically and historically have had to bear the burden of some of these developments.
But I think Mary Ellen makes a good point, is, you know, let's educate. And there are some incredible resources that were put together by our new colleague on the Affordable Housing Trust, Aaron Burdoff, and I'm happy to share those with you. And you know, we can get that information out to the public as well. So that is there, and I'll get that in the next couple of days.
You know, for example, you know, I remember listening to the Affordable Housing Trust when Wynn Properties was, you know, coming in, and they had offered, the Affordable Housing Trust offered Wynn Properties a very, a large corporation, very profitable corporation. They offered them $50,000. You know, that was pretty confusing. Why would you be offering $50,000 to a profitable organization that's going to come in and be making profit? So these are things that I think people need, I could say I need to get educated on, the difference between what is affordable housing, what is senior housing, affordable senior housing, things like that.
I think they made that investment to back the project, to make sure that they were the first ones in. So they said, absolutely, we're in, we're going to back you. Here's $50,000. You know, we want you to create as many units of affordable housing as possible. So I think what came out of it was 114 units, which will be added to the subsidized housing inventory. So when you look at the return, the $50,000 received, you know, 114 units. That's a pretty good return.
Well, is there 114?
There will be 114 units that will be counted towards our subsidized housing inventory.
Right.
I think 25% of those will actually be, you know, at 80% or less. I'm going off of memory, so don't.
Okay.
But yeah.
Right, but this is my point on.
You know, maybe we can have a joint meeting of the select board and the affordable housing committee and our community development committee, and we can come up with a presentation that it really just starts to frame maybe the type of land use board summit, that conversation that I think we would want to have as a piece of that. But I do think we should be talking about this more, and I think it should be part of a formal agenda item for the board, and perhaps our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee.
Okay. Any more questions for Sean on the report? Okay, select board time.
Could I make a comment on something Sean said?
Sure.
The event on the 12th by Emerson Baker at the library will be live streamed on the Town of Swampscott YouTube channel.
Oh, that's great. Ethan, thank you.
Ethan's thrown in commercials.
Nice.
Right.
Thanks, Ethan. Select board time. Anyone?
I have a couple things.
Okay.
The first being that I can only speak for myself and my family, but Halloween this year in Swampscott was fantastic. There were so many events from the week of Halloween up into the day of, whether it was trunk or treat from the elementary schools, the town hall trick or treat, or whether you were trick or treating day of, some of the streets were closed. There was just such a sense of community around town involving all sorts of age groups, and it was just a wonderful time to be part of the community. And I just want to commend everybody that participated in all of those events and the folks who put them on. It is very much appreciated. My kids are well stocked till Easter with all the candy.
Wait until next year. We're buying all the clearance Halloween decorations. We're gonna have a haunted town hall.
This
So
sounds lovely.
It's gonna
Can't
get
wait.
even.
Haunted Hawthorne.
That's right.
Yeah. I saw it in your report, but I didn't hear you say that there is a town-wide turkey hunt on November 20th, which ends at the indoor farmers market, which I think is the last market of the season.
Right.
For those of you who don't know, last year's winners will be participating and expect more of a challenge this year. So come out and try.
I think there needs to be a little bit more disclosure here. Select person Phelan. Who happened to win that last
The
year?
Phelan family won the turkey hunt last year. It was extremely
Want
fun.
to clarify what the turkey hunt is for people?
Oh, yes, it's a scavenger hunt around town put on by the rec department.
Right.
It's really cool.
It is.
We're not hunting turkeys.
No, we're not actually
literally.
hunting turkeys, although we're not.
WKR.
It's a scavenger hunt. My kids had a wonderful time. I hope that more people participate this year. It was just great fun, and it ended at the indoor farmers market. And we proudly display our trophy on the piano in the foyer. Also, I had a thought, Ethan, for your first installment of public access television, maybe the trash talk becomes a show.
Yeah.
And again, I'm offering up my recycle bins for somebody to come and critique how well we recycle.
Joe Doolett has members of his class that are entertaining how to put that together.
Okay, so I did speak to somebody at the farmer's market offering my recycle bins again. Okay. And I did get a copy of the trash survey, and if you have not, please access the QR code and take the trash survey. Because lots of people have thoughts about trash. I've heard them, I get emails about them, but now's your chance to tell everybody else.
Sunday, so I was lucky and fortunate to participate in the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research race in and around Swampscott. I was the only person in a costume. I thought it was going to be more Halloween focused.
You get a picture?
Did you read the fine print correctly?
I did not, but it was fun. It was a great event. There were probably 500-600 people in attendance. This was the Boston event, and I want to say that the Michael J. Fox Foundation has already raised well over $1 billion for Parkinson's research. So I think that was incredible, and just a big thanks to all the local organizers as well as Bentwater Brewing for coming out and being a part of it. And I look forward to bigger and better turnout next year and in future years.
Awesome. Such an important, charity, but, makes a huge difference in a number of families' lives that are dealing with Parkinson's.
So I have a couple things here. I am the liaison to the Solid Waste Committee, and they just are unbelievable committee as far as the hard work that they put in. So please, if people could take just a moment to fill out that survey, it would be much appreciated. At the last meeting, they had Republic, our solid waste removal, in there, and it was a very interesting conversation. We talked about how the trash is picked up, the customer service issue on it. Republic is really working hard. The goal is to be able to get it so that everyone has their own account with Republic, and if your trash isn't picked up or you're upset with something, you just immediately contact them, and then they take care of it. It'll be like one-stop shopping with Republic, whereas you don't have to call the Board of Health and then wait. It would just help eliminate the town having to shoulder any customer service issues. They also said that they had the grant program. I contacted Marzi about that. And they work hard at everything. I mean, it was kind of shocking to hear them. Believe it or not, our trash is picked up and it's sent out by train to Minnesota. So who would know? I also want to report, I'm not reporting on all my committees tonight, just a couple. On the Board of Assessors, I want to thank our elected officials on the Board of Assessors, Neil Sheehan, Laura Goodman, and Tasea Belciliu. These people worked really hard. The role of the assessors, for those of you who don't know, it's to ensure that personal property and real property is fairly and equally valued and classified for tax purposes. Oh, I also don't want to forget Mr. Richard Simmons, who is our acting
Thank you.
assessor, and Patriot Properties, who was involved. So every 5 years, we have a reclassification where all of our property is revalued, and they're tasked with preparing the annual recap. So they're tasked with preparing the annual recap so that tax rate can be set. They determine which piece of the levy we all get to share in. We get to have some responsibility for. This year, and this is, when I say this year, that's based on 2021, they saw astronomical increases in the value of your real estate. So the market average was 17%. Now don't panic, that doesn't mean your taxes are going up 17%. That just means values as an average went up 17%. And they did a thorough job on values and identified opportunities for next year, and they've already set up a schedule or a preliminary schedule on how they're going to work to even improve that. So I was really impressed on how they weren't the typical committee that just did the committee wave. They caused, I think they caused Sean a little stress, but they all worked it out. Yep. They worked it out, and everybody worked hard, and all the evaluations have gone to DOR. DOR has sent it back out. The one concern that I have is that I would really like to see on the website people knowing that they can go and look at their values, that you have a 10-day window to look at your values and to make comments to the assessor on your values. If you miss that 10-day window, that's fine. You can go for an abatement in January. But I really want to see that information out there for residents as soon as possible.
Should be on the website.
I looked at the website at 5 o'clock and I didn't see it.
Okay.
So
I met with Richard today, and I thought it was up, but I'll double check that.
okay, that'd be great. At the last meeting, we talked about, we went over Sean's evaluation, and I'm just wondering at what point, when do we start to talk about next year's evaluation as far as goals? Because we were asked to evaluate whether or not goals were attained. But I just want to know if we can get that onto the schedule on what
Yep.
we see for goals for next year so that we can get those met. And lastly, I look at the financials, and because I have a background from the Finance Committee, and I'm concerned about the overtime for the police and fire and where it's looking. And I would like to see the police chief come back in here within the month. I'd like to know a number of things. I want to know about what's happening with the overtime costs, what's happening with hiring, what's happening with training, and what's happening with speeding in the community. I took last week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I took my lunch break and I sat on Pine Street in front of the speeding board. And we have a speeding problem on there. And the reason I sat there on my own is because people call me all the time. And going to the Traffic Advisory Committee, I can tell you from living on Puritan Road, which is like Puritan Highway, the Traffic Advisory Committee hasn't had much success in getting a grip on what's going on with speeding. And it's a public hazard, it's unnerving, and on Pine, I can tell you on Pine Street, I was there, and I was there from work. I was in a white van with no letters on it. So people were coming and like looking, and I got out of I told them who I was, and there are a lot of families, a lot of young families living there on both sides of the street. So I would like to have the police chief in here. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say for tonight.
I don't have a lot. I'll just on the Halloween theme, just remind people, the town just sent out a message. If you still have Halloween pumpkins, the DPW's hosting a pumpkin drop-off on Saturday the 12th from 9 to 11 to compost your pumpkins. So hang on to them if you can. Put them in yard waste bags if they're getting rotten, and bring them on over to the DPW yard, and don't put them in your trash. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Somebody's hand up?
Yeah, it's okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, Ethan.